By the way, next week we'll start our series in the Psalms, Streams in the Desert. That'll begin next week. And you already saw that we had perhaps someone that you didn't know up front this morning, and we're going to tell you all about that before this service ends. We have some special guests with us here today. I hold in my hand a small battery-operated device, too small for you to be able to really see. It's, I know, at least 25 years old. It's a practical joker's joy. Roger Buck, a member of the congregation in Oregon, placed this under my office chair during the early days of that Oregon ministry. And whenever this little guy's jiggled, he makes a sound. I'm going to put it close to the microphone. Now, if I pound the pulpit, you'll hear it again, but it drove me crazy until I finally discovered the source. And of course, I immediately took it home and placed it under my daughter's, where she sits at the table. And then I informed the other members of the family, Jenny and Adam, that it was there and that they were to act, that we were to act like we heard nothing when she heard it. Of course, it drove her to distraction, much to my joy. And I finally said to her, you know, babe, you know Roger, who we know real well? She said, yeah. I said, Roger did say to me, call him if a strange high beeping sound occurs in your ears. And so she did. Roger laughed and said, look under your chair. She did. And after some time, she left. Intrigue at the Table. That was actually at a time when the Rasmussen family always ate dinner together. Intrigue, mystery at the table. Many of the written mysteries of years gone by centered around meals, around banquets, you know, everything from the porridge with Goldilocks and the Three Bears to Agatha Christie's 13 at dinner. Meals and mysteries, they tag along together. Today is our last in this series of messages, Meals with Jesus, that we've been looking at throughout the month. And we are going to take a look at the first Lord's Supper. Maybe now you know why we are not having communion until after the message today. We're going to look at the first Lord's Supper. We're going to look at communion. But we often don't call it the first Lord's Supper. What do we often call it? The Last Supper. Probably due to the art more than anything else. This story is recorded in all four Gospels. That's how important this first supper, first Lord's Supper, actually was. We're going to take a look at the Luke account. The Luke account, which is in the 22nd chapter of that book. But here's what I want you to see as we look through this story. So often, you know, we're trying to really figure something out and understand it. Well, there'll be some understanding here, I hope, but I want you to see that there is mystery in the Lord's Supper. There is mystery in the Lord's Supper. Let's look at some of those mysteries. How about the mystery of preparation? Verse 7, then came the day of unleavened bread on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, go and make preparations. That's what my version says, the mystery of preparation. Go and make preparations for us to eat the Passover. Where do you want us to prepare for it? They asked. He replied, as you enter the city, a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him to the house that he enters and say to the owner of the house, the teacher asks, where is the guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples. He will show you a large room upstairs, all furnished. Make preparations there. They left and found things just as Jesus had told them, so they prepared the Passover. And I say they prepared the Passover, shaking their heads in wonder. Because there was already mystery that was taking place here, just in the preparation. Verse 7 reminds us that this was the time of the Passover. The Passover Meal. That was the height of the Passover celebration, where they ate lamb. It was the most prominent of all Jewish feasts. It was celebrated once a year, every year, annually. What was it? What were they celebrating? They were celebrating a reenactment of the last of the 10 plagues. Do you remember what the last of the 10 was? It's when God took the firstborn from every family, except for those that put the blood of the lamb over the doorpost. They were saved. The Jewish people put the blood of the lamb over the doorpost. They were saved, and they were freed because Pharaoh finally, old hard-hearted Pharaoh, finally said, "Get out. I don't want you here in this country anymore." So they're celebrating. Now only Luke tells us there in the 8th verse who it was that Jesus sent out. Only the other gospel writers don't mention the names, but Luke tells us it was Peter and John, an old guy and a young guy, Peter and John. And look at the mystery. A man carrying a jar of water. Follow him. So they do. What mystery here? And the owner of the upper room must have been an acquaintance of Jesus's. And Jesus must have talked with that friend before, ahead of time. But it was mysterious to them. I wonder when the others arrived, the other 10, when they arrived for the meal, I wonder if anyone walked in and thought, "Whoa, who prepared all this?" Well, actually, my guess is that none of them did, because they were all men. Verse 13 says, so they prepared the Passover, not even knowing they were preparing the first communion. Show of hands. How many people here have ever been involved in preparing the communion service here at CCY? Show of hands. Keep them up. Keep them up. Look around, folks. Look. You didn't know that, did you? Mystery. You just come in. They walk down with the trays. Lo and behold, not only have the glasses been cleaned from the week before. Well, actually, no. They're disposed of. Just kidding on that. We use disposable. But everything still has to be cleaned up, the trays and all of that. Not only is everything cleaned up, but new bread. New grape juice is there. Teresa Brooke heads that up, this ministry. Used to be Lisa Williams that took care of that. Now it's Teresa Brooke. Teresa, just kind of wave a little bit. I know you don't like to be... Yeah, look at her. She's doing this. She's the drummer's wife. So much a servant. And all of these that assist. I wrote down some names. I won't get them all, I'm sure. But listen to some of these names. Jana Zebach. This is right now. The people that help. Jana Zebach, Kathy Smith, Jana Montgomery, Kim Graham, Chris and Rachel Pinot and family, Mikkel Miller and her mom, Mary Montgomery, Doug and Carrie Bond, Tony and Patty Bollinger, Troy and Kara Anderson. And I know I don't have all of them, but they prepare each Sunday and they clean up. And like I said, to most of us, it's a mystery. It's the secret of preparation. Oh, there's really a deeper secret. You know what the deeper secret of preparation is? A servant's heart. That's why it gets done. Do you think it's any coincidence here that as we read this story, we see Jesus serving them the emblems? You think it's any coincidence that it is at this gathering where he washed the feet of his own disciples, the master? You think it's any coincidence? I don't. Because the mystery of preparation is the servant's heart. Hey, there's another mystery here. It's the mystery of dissension. Verse 24. A dispute arose among them as to which of them was considered to be the greatest. And Jesus said to them, and I see him shaking his head, the kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who exercise authority over them call themselves benefactors. But you're not to be like that. Instead, the greatest among you should be like the youngest, and the one who rules like the one who serves. For who is greater, the one who's at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one who's at the table? But I'm among you as the one who serves. Boy, there's a twist of words. You are those who have stood by me in my trials, and I confer on you a kingdom, just as my Father conferred on me, so that you may eat and drink at my table. Come to the table. That you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and sit on thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Oh, he shakes his head at them. A dispute arose. A great mystery, they thought. Who's the greatest? But that's not the great mystery, and Jesus sets them straight. The great mystery here is, how can you allow dissension at a time like this? It's so inappropriate at the table. That's why the Apostle Paul later on writes Christians who were meeting around the table on a regular basis. And he says, in the following directives I have no praise for you, for your meetings do more harm than good. What is he talking about? Well, in the first place, I hear that when you come together as a church, there are divisions among you. And to some extent, I believe it. Dissension. Who's the greatest? I mean, where does that come from? We know where that comes from. Selfishness, sin as it's rooted deep within us. The following is titled, Introduction to Property Law from a Toddler's Perspective. If I like it, it's mine. If I can take it away from you, it's mine. If I had it a while ago, it's mine. If I say it's mine, it's mine. If it looks like mine, it's mine. And if I say I saw it first, it's mine. If you're having fun with it, it's mine. If you lay down your toy, it's mine. If it's broken, it's yours. Where did that come from? We see it from so early on. That sin of selfishness, and selfishness always spawns power seeking. James Baker. He was once the White House Chief of Staff and the Secretary of the Treasury under Reagan. And later on, under the first Bush, George Herbert, he was Secretary of State. And he once sounded a warning about the dangers of becoming egotistical. Listen to what he said. I'm going to quote him. He was asked by a reporter, what's the most important thing that you've learned since being in Washington? And here's what James Baker replied. Temporal power is fleeting. He said, one day I was driving through the White House gates where I noticed a man that was walking alone down Pennsylvania Avenue. He had held my position in a previous administration. But now, there he was, alone. No reporters, no security, no adoring public, no trappings of power, just one solitary man with his thoughts. Baker said, that mental picture continually serves to remind me of the impermanence of power and the impermanence of place. Who's the greatest among you? The mystery of dissension. Nothing is more out of place during communion than the question, which of us is more important? Who is more important than who in this body? Nothing is more important than that. Nothing is more inappropriate than that. Nothing is more appropriate during communion than reconciliation. I know. If you're like me, communion tends to just be this. It's you and me, Lord. We're here at the table, and that's very true. But the Lord is saying, we're at a table, and it's a big one. Look around. Reconciliation during the Lord's Supper is so appropriate, because we should be rejoicing together with one another about our salvation. The playing field is level. There's no big shots. We're all just a bunch of sinners praising God for His grace. Mercy Me always says it so well, don't they? Grace got you. Sing so the back row hears you. Glide, because walking just won't do. Dance. You don't have to know how to. Ever since, grace got you. Laugh till your whole side's hurting. Smile like you just got away with something. Why? Because you just got away with something. Ever since, grace got you. The mystery of preparation, the mystery of dissension. How about the mystery of attrition at the table? The mystery of attrition, and it shows itself more than once. There is, first of all, the attrition in the form of betrayal. As we go back here to this passage in Luke, and we look at the 21st verse, Jesus says, the hand of him who is going to betray me is with mine on the table. Everybody's hands went up. Wow. Powerful. The Son of Man will go as it has been decreed, but woe to that man who betrays him. And they began to question among themselves which of them it might be who would do this. Who would do this? Who would betray you? Betrayal. We're not talking here about a momentary feeling or a weak moment or an impulse. We're talking about a deep-seated plan of betrayal here. How do we know that? First 6 verses. Now the festival of unleavened bread, called the Passover, was approaching, and the chief priests and the teachers of the law were looking for some way to get rid of Jesus, for they were afraid of the people. Then Satan entered Judas, called Iscariot, one of the 12. And Judas went to the chief priests and the officers of the temple guard and discussed with them how he might betray Jesus. They were delighted and agreed to give him money. He consented and watched for an opportunity to hand Jesus over to them when no crowd was present. The mystery here shows up in the form of betrayal. Verse 3 tells a lot. Satan entered Jesus. Jesus. Never. As Satan enters Judas, understand what's going on. Judas, I think, is extremely disappointed in Jesus. Okay? See, Judas was all about what? Material. The material. The here and now, not the spiritual. What was Jesus all about? He wasn't going to set up a kingdom here and now. He wasn't going to sit on a physical throne here and now at that time. No. It was to come. Immaterial, spiritual. Judas cannot handle that, and Satan, ever the opportunist, says, this is my chance. You know that Satan hangs around even during a communion service? Have you If you've seen some of those different plays, like The Promise at Branson, or even the great movie, The Passion of the Christ, Satan's there, always lurking in the background. He's there, and he's looking especially for those who cannot see past the material. Those who are consumed with the things, the stuff of here and now. You know why? Because that's all he can offer you. He can't offer you anything for eternity. He can offer only the immediate pleasures, the here and now, the 30 pieces of silver here and now that are going to be out of your hands in no time, just like they were with Judas. If you're here today as a potential betrayer, remember this: Judas had a choice. In this very passage, in this very meal, Jesus reminded him of that. And even after his betrayal, he had a choice. Jesus here is still offering his body and his blood at the table to the betrayer. And he offers it to you today. Boy, it's mysterious, isn't it? That there could be this kind of attrition at the table. There's betrayal at the table. There's denial at the table. Simon, Simon, verse 31. Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat. But I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fall or fail. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. But he replied, Lord, I'm ready to go with you to prison and to death. And Jesus answered, I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you'll deny me 3 times. You'll deny 3 times that you know me. When Jesus announced, there's going to be someone at the table that betrays me, we read in one of the Gospels, in John's account, that Peter leans over to John, knowing that John is the closest to Jesus of the 12, and says to him, who is it? Which one? Peter probably is about to go punch somebody in the face. Which one? Peter was the one most sure of himself, most sure of his faith. I'm imagining this. Peter did not ask the question, is it I? Because I don't think he even considered that he could possibly deny Jesus. Who is the one here today at our table? Well, at the Lord's table. Who is the one here today that has the strongest faith? Who is the one that we would say we would vote them most likely to succeed? Watch out, because denial is not just a river in Egypt. It is a real possibility for all of us, and that's a mystery. And desertion is a third form of attrition here, and that's a mystery. All of them seem somewhat aware of their weakness, and that so many of them ask the question, Lord, is it I? Why did they ask that question? Well, that's the flip side of overconfidence. So don't be overconfident. Fred Smith, prominent Christian businessman down in the Dallas area, a number of years ago, said he was with a Christian woman who was in her 70s. A number of people there were having dinner at her home, and she said this to Fred. She'd been a Christian for years. She said, Fred, there's no sin of which I'm incapable. And he thought she was just being humble, just being modest. And so he delivered back, kind of a patronizing statement. She pulled him up short. He said, here's what she'd said back to me. I could be a prostitute. I could be a thief. I could be a murderer. I am a sinner. This very night, Jesus said in the Matthew account, you will all fall away on account of me. For it is written, I'll strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. And so it was, just as he said. The women were at the cross. Only one of the 12. The other 11 were off hanging themselves, denying him, hiding, deserters. How can this be? That's the mystery. The intrigue at the table, the mystery of attrition, betrayal, and denial, and desertion. It's always present, and it's always possible. What do we sing? Prone to wander. Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Because there's always that free choice. There's always that free will that we have. And so we have mysteries here at the Lord's Supper. We got the mystery of preparation and the mystery of dissension. We've got the mystery of attrition. But here's the greatest mystery here. The greatest one is the mystery of salvation. The mystery of salvation. Verse 19, and he took bread, gave thanks, and broke it, and gave it to them, saying, this is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. In the same way, after the supper, and by the way, they didn't do them immediately one after the other. They took the bread during the supper, and at the close of the supper, he took the cup, saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you. Now, for years, the Jews had celebrated, for centuries, they had celebrated the Passover meal. And in order to do that, they would, of course, go out, and if they could afford it, maybe if they couldn't, they would purchase this perfect lamb, and they would sacrifice it. And they would eat part of it. Why? Why were they doing that? To cover their sins. Yes, they were celebrating the freedom from Exodus, but it was bigger than that. It was to cover their sins for another year until finally the Messiah would come in. They'd always pronounce that at the meal, as they would look forward to the time when the Messiah would finally come and totally deliver them. And it was a mystery to them. When is he going to come? Who will he actually be? How will he deliver us? Now, it was prophesied, right? It's prophesied many places in the Old Testament, but as is often the case, the prophecies were cloaked in symbolism. So when Jesus, the Messiah, their Messiah, finally came, they didn't recognize him. They misunderstood. They called him a blasphemer. They crucified him. And in many ways, the gospel just remained a mystery in their hearts. They still didn't understand it. I think that's a reference that Paul makes in Ephesians in the 3rd chapter and the 2nd verse when he says, surely you've heard about the administration of God's grace that was given me, that is, the mystery. See, the gospel was a mystery. The mystery made known to me by revelation, as I have already written briefly. And if you go on down all the way through the 6th verse, you can see some more about it. But it's a description of how God let that mystery finally be made known. Because the word mystery that's used here in Ephesians actually means something that was once hidden but is now revealed. I guess you could say, we were talking about some mysteries at the Lord's table when we looked at those first 3. But this is the mystery of the Lord's table. The mystery of the Lord's table is salvation. When Jesus Christ, the Messiah, came as the Lamb of sacrifice. And every time we celebrate the Lord's Supper, we are proclaiming the mystery revealed. The bread, it's not a mystery. We're saying a real physical body was beaten and tortured and wounded, broken, bruised, and 3 days later resurrected so that one day our bodies could experience that. That's what we're saying when we take the bread. The mystery is revealed as we consume the juice, as we recognize that real blood flowed from that body of Christ. Perfect, sinless blood. That's not in our DNA, is it? No. We have very, very imperfect blood, folks. And yet that perfect blood of Jesus flowed that it might overcome the poison of sin in our blood and give us new life. That's the mystery revealed. I found this. Wish I could claim it as some great discovery all on my own, but no. I just read it. As Jesus went forth with his disciples on his way to Gethsemane, they passed over the ravine of the Kidron. John tells us that. The Kidron. The little creek. Now listen to this. A drain ran from the temple altar down to the Kidron ravine to take away the blood of their sacrifices. This is Passover time. They are lined up sacrificing these animals. Since it was the Passover, more than 200,000 lambs would be slain. When Jesus and his band crossed the Kidron, it was red with the blood of the sacrificial lambs. Blood is mentioned over 300 times in the Bible. It is so essential to the doctrine of the atonement of Jesus. It lies at the very heart of the gospel, for it is through the blood of the cross, Colossians says, that Jesus reconciled us to God. Years ago, there was a terrible railroad accident, killed a lot of people because a commuter train stalled on the tracks, and there was a fast freight coming behind it that was due to arrive in minutes. They sent a conductor back to flag down the approaching flyer. That was the term they used, the flyer that was headed down the tracks. They assured the passengers, everything will be all right, you can relax. We've got somebody back there flagging down the big freight. Suddenly, the speeding engine came bearing down upon them. The crash left a scene of horror, many people killed. The engineer of that second train escaped death. He jumped from his cab just before the crash, and in court, he was asked, "Why didn't you stop? Why didn't you stop?" He said, "I saw a man waving a warning flag, but it was just a warning. It was yellow. So I thought they just wanted me to slow down." They examined the flag, and the mystery was explained. It had been red, the flag, but because of exposure to the sun and weather, it had become a dirty yellow. I quote an old-time preacher, so forgive the wording, okay? Just get the message. "Oh, the lives eternally wrecked by the yellow gospels that we are still hearing today. The bloodless theories of unregenerated men that send their hearers to their doom instead of stopping them on their downward road." The old preacher Ironside said that. Folks, don't be deceived by an anemic yellow gospel. That's why we sing the old hymn sometimes. I think we sang it here even a few weeks ago. Are you washed in the blood? There's mystery at the supper. Mystery of preparation and dissension and attrition and salvation. There's mystery. You can stay seated. We're going to sing a song that's going to take us into a time around the table. Named Shoichi, who lived in a cave in the island of Guam. from 1944 to 1972. He stayed in that cave. He feared for his life. 28 years. Eating frogs, rats, snails, shrimp, nuts, mango to stay alive. And even when he figured out that the war was over somehow, he was afraid to come out, fearing that he would be executed. 2 hunters just happened upon him one day and escorted him to freedom. The man was living all of this time under the indictment of sins that had been dealt with. But he simply had not appropriated the atonement that was available. The atonement. Another word for it, the forgiveness of your sins is available in Jesus. We're going to jump back into the chorus of that song, Come to the Table. If you need to come to Jesus this morning, and we use that little phrase, we had a come to Jesus moment. Well, this is where it started, this concept. You come to Jesus for the forgiveness of sins. If you need to become a Christian, in other words, that's always open here at CCY. This is one of those times you're welcome to come to the front. You're also welcome at this time to join our decision prayer team in the back. The bonds there to pray with you. You just slip to the back, share your need. They'll keep it quiet, confidential, whatever it is that's burdening you. You can just move while we're singing to the back, all right? But let's allow those responses, even if they're right where we stand in our hearts, let's allow those responses to what Jesus did for us. Let's sing that chorus.